back, Nostalgia. Dave here in our podcast, What's Going on in Pop Culture Right Now. This week, we return to the movies once again with the Alto Knights, the mafia film with Robert De Niro in a dual role. Also, the latest Jason Statham action vehicle, A Working Man. On the TV side, of course, The Studio has dropped on Apple TV Plus, starring Seth Rogen. And after a few weeks out, I am getting to Netflix's sensation Adolescence and all the surprises it entails. And lastly, for good and bad, we're talking about the not officially released new Kanye West album, Bully. Rich text, to say the least. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good. I'll see you next week. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of A Working Man, the action thriller film from David Ayer starring Jason Statham. This film is adapted from a book which was originally optioned by Sylvester Stallone, which is why Stallone has a co-write on this film's script alongside Ayer. And this is David Ayer and Jason Statham's second movie in as many years, following last year's surprise sleeper hit The Beekeeper. While A Working Man was not a January, dumpuary release like The Beekeeper, it fits a similar mold. David Ayer's A Working Man delivers many of what you expect from a Jason Statham action thriller film, although as Jason Statham has aged, he's nearly 60 years old now, he seems to enjoy playing characters with hearts of gold and seems to like being the avenging angel. That's very much what you get in A Working Man. I think what's most fun about this movie is, unsurprisingly, watching Statham beat the pulp out of various goons, in this case watching him slaughter his way up the ranks of the Russian mafia around the Chicago area. Does the movie have the visual style or the creativity in its action as, say, John Wick? No, it does not. While the movie still has some charms, I do think it lacks a lot of the playfulness that The Beekeeper did, and unfortunately has a pretty convoluted plot. Ultimately, we don't spend enough time with any of the long list of villains in this movie to really get attached to any of them as antagonists, but Statham remains reliable enough for what the movie is. The movie certainly has a familiar but effective framing where Statham's character, Levin Cade, is this ex-Royal Marines soldier now working as a construction foreman for Michael Pena and his family. When Pena's daughter gets kidnapped in a trafficking scheme, with their Russian involvement, of course, Statham, unsurprisingly, has to get back in the game. Does the movie really surprise you at any turn? No, but I do think there is some satisfying moments where he offs various characters. I just think if maybe the plot was a bit more streamlined, we would have even more satisfying payoff, because Cade just isn't really fighting against any one bad guy for all that long before he takes them out and moves on to the next one. And when there's no really standout set piece moment, again what John Wick does, the never-ending slaughter gets a bit dull after a while. As for David Ayer, I don't think he's really been able to build himself back up as an intriguing filmmaker ever since the Suicide Squad debacle. He's been getting by with stuff lately, like The Beekeeper, like A Working Man, but we're so far removed from the peaks of his career, Training Day, End of Watch, Fury, that I think we gotta see it again before we get too invested. And as for Statham, I think his more recent work with Guy Ritchie, of course his work in the Fast series, that's been probably more enjoyable from him, doing a riff on what he always does as the kind of steely action character that he has in his bag at this point. And I think a movie like The Beekeeper just had enough fun and lightness to it that it mixed it up a little bit, whereas A Working Man doesn't quite get there. Let me know, though, what you think of A Working Man. What you like most about the movie? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of the Alto Knights, the new gangster crime drama film from Barry Levinson, starring Robert De Niro in a dual role as famed mafia members Frank Costello and Vito Genovese. The Alto Knights is a really strange phenomenon here, just because it's Robert De Niro, in his 80s at this point, once again returning to the gangster genre. Of course, Robert De Niro, the greatest actor in this genre, of course, starring in the Holy Trinity from Scorsese with Goodfellas, Casino, and The Irishman, as well as The Godfather Part 2, The Untouchables, Scorsese's Mean Streets. I mean, he's the gangster goat, obviously. And yet, it's so strange that De Niro decided to go back to the well once again, because The Irishman in 2019 was such a perfect send off and was like the best kind of end cap for all of this, because it was a movie about the passage of time and like growing older and how those things happen, right? Like it was a great end stone. It made sense as like the final chapter. And yet De Niro, who is keeping busy, he's a working actor still, of course, on Zero Day on Netflix this year as well. He's keeping busy. But why he would want to go back to this is just so curious, especially with someone like Barry Levinson, who also up there in age and hasn't exactly had his fastball as a director in some time. Also in this mix is the writer Nicholas Pileggi, who of course wrote the book that was adapted into Goodfellas. Again, why would Pileggi think he had anything else to say? And this is a movie that had been in like various stages of development, at least conception wise, for many years, and reportedly was greenlit by Warner Brothers because David Zaslav is friends with Pileggi and wanted to make it happen. So this movie got made, for a non small sum, close to $50 million, with marketing factored in, of course, too, and is the latest Warner Brothers bomb. Unfortunately, the movie has not performed well. And I just don't think it really adds a whole lot to this genre. And the movie itself just isn't good enough to stand out at all, even if you take the De Niro, the Pileggi out of it all. Robert De Niro playing a dual role in the Alto Knights is not a problem. He's able to differentiate the two performances. The makeup and the prosthetics also do a good job of making them feel like two different characters. The problem is the Alto Knights has a really bad script, exposition for days, tons of really poor voiceover, and just surface level storytelling. There's just not a lot here to be excited about, especially when you compare it to the pantheon entries that De Niro has previously been a part of. The intrigue of telling real life mafia stories is certainly appealing, but the Alto Knights is adapting stuff that was more famously shown to us in previous movies as well. There's just really not a lot going on here, and it's just too surface level and thin for what it does focus on to really be excited about. When I think of the plot, I mean, this movie, shows us the McKellen hearings with Frank Costello testifying, volunteering to testify before Congress, whereas all the other mafia members who got subpoenaed pled the fifth, of course. But this is something that, of course, was direct inspiration for Michael Corleone testifying in The Godfather Part 2, right? So you already have a better version of this scene versus what the Alto Knights does. And yes, this is like trying to tell the real story, blah, 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 but it's just such an inferior, thing on screen. Frankly, I think it would have been really cool if maybe they focused on something like the Appalachian meeting, of course, where the mafia get found by the police at this big meeting. That's portrayed in the Alto Knights, something that hasn't really been adapted in any of the big gangster movies. It was referenced in The Irishman, of course, but like, yeah, I mean, that was something that I thought was probably the most interesting aspect of the movie, even if the movie just kind of runs and skips through everything. The Vito Genovese performance is supposed to really invoke a Joe Pesci performance. And again, I think De Niro does a good job of differentiating that. But, Frank Costello, not the most intriguing person to be with, because he's not exactly in the mix and involved with a lot of action over the course of this movie. He's more of a sedentary private guy. So we're watching him watch TV and things of that nature. It's just not as compelling as it could have been. And I think I always feel like the gang war stuff, that's always like undersold. It's nice to see Michael Rispoli, of course, a veteran to these types of roles, of course. Cosmo Jarvis is Vinny the Chin, kind of wasted, obviously. That character, Vincent Gigante, was like not as high up in the mafia at that time, but I would have liked a little bit more given how awesome Cosmo Jarvis was on Shogun, for example. I'll always be into gangster movies, and I'm really into like American mafia history. I just find it so fascinating. Obviously, like I'm from New York, so like maybe I have extra interest in it compared to the normal person, but I find it really cool. And I think telling like great like adaptations of real life gangsters is something that maybe you could still do one day. Like I think of the Paramount Plus series, The Offer, and how disappointing that was. I think there's a lot of bad entries in this genre, and obviously we have all the legendary stuff from Scorsese and Coppola at this point that I think you gotta really have a take, you gotta really point of view, or at least have a really good script to even attempt this at this point. And even if you're doing it without legends like Robert De Niro, like you're up against such monumentous works. Maybe the answer to this is that you don't continue to do, Italian mafia movies. Maybe the future is in telling crime movies based on other characters, other crime factions across the globe. That's probably the future of this genre, right? I mean, the American mafia, specifically the New York mafia, has been really significantly adapted, right? Even Capone, for that matter, we've gotten a lot of Chicago, right? So I think there's still room for stuff, but maybe you're gonna focus on Asia. You're gonna focus on Latin America, Europe. Den of Thieves went to Europe with its sequel. I'm not sure, but yeah, the Alto Knights. It's a disappointment, and I kind of wish De Niro didn't bother, just because I mean, the reason to do this movie after The Irishman just doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to begrudge the man for working, but he's staying pretty busy. It's not like he was desperate for a role and took this on. He's been getting tons of work, so like you just didn't need to do this. But yeah, let me know, what did you think of The Alto Knights? Is there anything you liked about it more than me? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of The Studio, the new satirical comedy series from Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg via their Point Grey production studio. Rogen and Goldberg, they've been really well established at this point as some of the most consistent and prolific producers in Hollywood, working on tons of projects just at like the EP level, less of a creative level, such as The Boys, but also stuff they're a lot more involved with. And of course, The Studio is certainly one of those because Seth Rogen is also the star of the series. The core premise of The Studio is excellent for a comedy series. Seth Rogen, the new head of the film division at a movie studio, trying to navigate the desire to make money versus the desire to make good art. And The Studio is truly the most Apple TV Plus show of all because the series is littered with famous actors, many of which are playing fictional versions of themselves. There are truly too many celebrity cameos to name. It's a constant theme of the series. But the core ethos of this show, I think, is really appealing because it has a really, I think, warm yet also incredibly funny approach to the desire, the fulfillment of making good art and like what that means. To me, it doesn't really come across as preachy or elitist or anything like that because the core conflict, as far as a satirical comedy series can have one, is something that's really broad and appealing to all. Seth Rogen's Matt Remnick character has taken over for the recently deposed Catherine O'Hara's character, who's kind of a stand-in for like an Amy Pascal figure in Hollywood. You have Ike Barinholtz as an executive and friend of Rogen's Matt. Chase Sweet Wonders plays Matt's assistant, and Catherine Hahn plays the head of marketing at the studio, Continental. And also Bryan Cranston is like the CEO, like owner of the studio. Of that group, I'm actually really excited to see Chase Sweet Wonders and see what she can do. She was in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies a few years ago, of course. And if you think about that movie, she was probably the least famous, remember of the main cast in that movie, given how loaded that film was, right? But this feels like a really great opportunity for her to get a lot more eyes on her. I'm excited for that. And I think she has a good energy in the first few episodes, so we'll see. And then, of course, there's just so many like epic cameos. I mean, you have Martin Scorsese in the first episode, absolutely crazy. I mean, he's done a lot of acting at this point, honestly, big and small. But this is probably one of the most significant cameos he's done in a long time. I thought it was hilarious. Sarah Polley also has a huge role in the second episode, Greta Lee as well. I think the physical comedy of the second episode, The Oner, was really great. I think there's a lot of stuff here for like film fans, people that are into like the industry and like cinephiles and that kind of stuff, and there's like filmmaking techniques. But it's also just kind of like really broad comedy as well. So I think this is a show that is wide ranging enough and appealing enough to a pretty diverse audience, but has a lot of actual like industry detail for people that are more into that sort of thing. Of course, this is a show that's taking place in and around Los Angeles and was actually filmed there, which, as we know, is an increasing rarity in terms of Hollywood productions. And I think the meta aspect of so much of what's going on in this show is incredibly prescient. At the end of the day, though, the show is funny, and I think it's a big success through the beginning. It's great to see Seth Rogen in a starring comedy role again. He hasn't had too many of those last few years, as again, he's shifted more into being a writer and a producer. So it's great to see him back again. And I mean, obviously, he's still got it. One of our great comedy actors of the last, 20 years at this point. So that's great. And Ike Barinholtz, as a supporting comedy face, also great to be with. He's equally hilarious. So I'm all in on this show. I think the premise, the minute to minute humor of it all is really working. Looking forward to seeing the rest of the season. And I would not be shocked if this is the latest Apple show to get a green light for a second season. Let me know, what did you think of Apple TV Plus's The Studio? What did you like most about it? And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Mac Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Adolescence, the British crime drama miniseries out now on Netflix. 4 episodes in total. Adolescence comes from prolific British writer Jack Thorne and also Stephen Graham, who stars as the father of a 13-year-old boy accused of murder. Adolescence really came out of nowhere, I think, for most people, and has been quite the story because I think there's so much to get into here, of course, a series that I really loved. Adolescence has ratcheted up to #1 on Netflix's chart, which I think is really impressive given the really serious subject matter at the core of this series. It's actually a great win for Netflix all around because it's both popular and high quality. We don't often say that about the most popular things on Netflix. Adolescence also stands out because Philip Berrettini directed this series in a series of one-shot takes for each episode. And this is true oneers every time. They did not stitch and make fake oneers, as alluded to in episode 2 of Apple's The Studio very recently. This is real one-take stuff, and it actually adds something substantial to the storytelling in the show. So I'm going to jump into everything about Adolescence, spoiling really what it's about and how it surprises and really nails what it's going for in a truly unexpected way. Netflix's Adolescence is a unexpected television masterpiece. When watching a miniseries about a 13-year-old boy accused of murder, you are naturally inclined to watch this show expecting for some other shoe to drop, expecting some twist, some revelation. You expect it to be about plot. Adolescence stands out because this show is so packed with rich thematic material in only 4 hours. Each episode makes such a significant impact that by the time you complete this series, any plot revelations and plot progression is so beyond the point of this show. By no means is it a light watch, but man was I impressed with how much this show was able to communicate. The continuous one-take filmmaking also really adds to this because none of the actors ever get to hide. You are always with these characters as they are dealing with significant and multi-layered emotions. Unfortunately, it's also a show that's coming at a really fitting time. Newcomer Owen Cooper plays the accused, and my god, is this a out of nowhere brilliant performance. Episode 3 in particular is on the shortlist for the best episodes of the year, and Adolescence is without a question going to be one of the best shows of 2025. From the very beginning when you watch this show, the first episode regards the arrest, right? And we start with the perspective of the police officers who go in the morning and arrest young Jamie Miller and accuse him of murdering a classmate. And the way they're talking to him, treating him with some respect, treating him like the kid that he is. And you're watching the kind of sheer audaciousness of the cops knocking a door down at 6 a.m. and taking a kid away. You're trained to watch it as, oh, like, what's the twist? What's happening, right? Like, what was he framed? What actually happened? Like, what is going on here, right? And you're just naturally inclined to side with him, the accused, and the family that's so taken aback, not expecting anything like this to happen to the son that they've by all means understood to be a good kid. And as you go through, and again, the oneer is so effective right away because we get taken to the police station, we watch all the processing, and you see it as both routine, but also something that's disliked in the police station on the account of it being a kid and not an adult, would-be criminal. And the progression of that episode, I think, is so masterful. And then the way it ends is like the ultimate like mic drop, because you watch the CCTV video and we understand that Jamie Miller stabbed the girl that died. Like there is no ambiguity. He did kill her, and that's following, I think, a really great like interrogation scene on the point of the police where they're questioning a kid who they know already did it because they have a mountain of evidence, even if they don't have a murder weapon. And then you watch the incredulity of his dad, played by Stephen Graham, who gets to be in there because he's a juvenile. And man, I mean, it's just such a knockout, right? And I think from there, you're like watching Adolescence. Okay, wow, 13-year-old murderer. That's what this is going to be about, right? Maybe it'll have a police procedural type, lawyer crime drama vibe to it, right? We get introduced to the lawyer character. We already spent some time with those cops. What's going on, right? And then episode 2, again, fucking great episode. Like it takes us to somewhere completely different. We're with the cops again, and these cops are played by Ashley Walters and Faye Marsay from Andor, Game of Thrones fame. And they're going to Jamie's school because they're trying to determine a motive. Like, why did he kill this girl? And also maybe trying to find a murder weapon because they don't have one. And what that episode ends up being about, it's not about the plot. It's not about them finding the murder weapon. It's about like, I think it's just, again, so rich. We watch this public school that's so clearly understaffed, and we see these dynamics between these kids and how well and poorly they treat each other, right? And we see the cops in real time learn about the whole, social media bullying apparatus and how foreign it is to many adults. Incredible episode once again, just because, again, like it's focusing on something so much more higher level than just this one crime. And again, as we're starting to delve deeper into what was going on, we learn that this was an instance of bullying where Jamie had been being bullied by the girl that he ends up killing. And specifically, the bullying was, accusing him of, being an incel, basically, which is so wild because, again, you're talking about a 13-year-old, right? And they're already like that deep into the abuse and the sense of self-pride or lack thereof, right? And then you get to episode 3, and again, it's completely different. We never see the cops again. Episode 3, we go to the detention center where Jamie is being held. Jamie's in this detention center, and he's having these one-on-ones with Brienne, played by Erin Doherty of The Crown fame, and she is a like psychologist, independent psychologist, but appointed by the court, by the justice system, to kind of evaluate Jamie's state, you could say. And this is a absolute tour de force episode. I think both Owen Cooper and Erin Doherty are absolutely fantastic in this, and I mean it is terrifying stuff, right? Because you see Brienne realize over the course of this very long session, it wasn't their first one at that she's talking to someone who's still clearly a child, right? Like has an undeveloped brain, clearly. Like there's still so many juvenile aspects of him. And then he has these absolutely terrifying instances of rage and that's he can't control. And it also has a complete like not unrealistic, but like just he has like this delusion about what he's done, the fact that he's murdered someone and his life is over. Like he just doesn't really understand what he has done, despite having such a vicious emotional response, to the bullying, right? And the show has been progressing to this through each episode, where and I think the main takeaways of this, which are concluded a bit in the 4th episode, regarding what the internet does to a lot of young boys, in terms of warping their perception of things, many of those things including masculinity, gender relations, what you are and are entitled to, and things of that nature. They directly reference the manosphere and Andrew Tate in this series. It is haunting stuff, and unfortunately it's incredibly prescient and relevant material, as this type of stuff and crimes related to this type of thing are increasing worldwide. I mean, it's wild to see so quickly the UK has decided to show at least parts of this series in school for this very reason. It's wild stuff. In episode 3, I think, again, like it's the performance that you get from Owen Cooper as he turns on a dime and has clear psychopathic behavior and such anger, such craze, such like true like depth to his emotion, despite also being completely like unaware of what's truly going on. And you see Brianny's revelations of what's going on, and what she's really dealing with over the course of that hour. You see her take breaks and kind of be overwhelmed about what's happening and get startled at times by the outbursts of anger and things like that. And I think it's wild. It's a wild episode, you know. And then you got episode 4, which again, completely different. This time we're with the rest of Jamie's family. Stephen Graham, of course, is the dad. The mom is Christine Tremarco, and the older sister is played by, I believe, a newcomer, Emily Pease. And they're just trying to, go about their day, move on with their lives. It's the dad's birthday. They seem to be having a good day. The sister seems to be handling things as well as she can, with a clear acknowledgement that she's the older sister of a murderer. But, they're doing okay. And then, they go outside. The family van has been vandalized, and they decide, well, we better go get that taken care of. And they're going to drive down together to like a local like Home Depot store stand-in, Wainwright it's called. And the good day just seems to break down. And then I think the episode really crescendos when they get back home, especially where you have the parents talking to each other about like what went wrong, what did they do wrong as the parents of the murderer, right? The fallacy of thinking their son's doing okay and he's safe because he's at home all the time, at home on his computer, staying up late at night, right, on the internet, things like that. And they look at their older daughter, who seems to be successful and doing well in many regards, and they see how they could have done so right there, and then clearly not done enough with their youngest. And then I think the takeaway is that, well, is that even true? Is it actually just a big crapshoot? Or is the world changing so fast that it's really hard to manage and protect, vulnerable people from becoming something like this? During the episode, you get the phone call where Jamie calls and tells his dad that he's decided to plead guilty. And like that's like the closest thing you get to like what's going on, right? Like watching the show, would you love to like read or hear about Brianny's report, her takeaways from episode 3, what her all her interviews? Of course, right? Because it's fascinating, because these characters are so rich, the themes are so impressive. That's not what the show's about, right? Do we go to the sentencing? Of course not. Nope. The episode does not have any interest in that. The show does not have any interest in that because the show is so thematically above the fold when it comes to the actual plot. I'm just so impressed with this, for a show that's so heavy, so tough to sit with because it's so dark. And yet, I think it just is a complete masterpiece. And again, like the cliche of British television being better, often because it has more brevity. Goddamn, this is 4 episodes, 4 hours of Adolescence, and how much is in there in terms of character growth, character dynamics, impeccable writing, amazing craft with like really, I think, impactful one take filmmaking style, out of nowhere acting revelation on the part of Owen Cooper, and then loads of relevant commentary about gender relations, serving our youth, the public education, parenting in the new age. The list goes on. What a masterpiece, right? Given that it's a Netflix show, right? The budget will be there. This is the fucking frontrunner of frontrunners for best limited series at the Emmys this year, right? If Baby Reindeer's gonna clean up, this is a show that's a phenomenon on par with Baby Reindeer, but is so much more impressive creatively and thematically. It's gonna be on my top 10 shows at the end of the year. It's really just a question of how high. We'll see about that at the end of the year. Let me know though, what did you think of Adolescence? Are you as knocked out and surprised by what the show is and isn't as I am? Let me know what most stood out to you. And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Kanye West's 11th album, Bully. This is technically Kanye's 11th album. Of course, this is a not officially released project, which seems to be more and more the norm with him lately. So I'm going to get into the album, get into the concept of this, where we're at with it. But obviously, Kanye is continuing to devolve as a public figure, saying tons of hateful rhetoric and all kinds of shock tactics and whatnot. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze or diagnose anything that's going on with him. It's pretty despicable. It's also pretty sad because it's just coming across as incredibly desperate for attention, and he's kind of transparent at this point about how kind of one note he is with a lot of that stuff. And that's what is so weird about Bully, is because the music is nothing like how he is acting publicly these days. So I'm not defending anything he does publicly at this point. There's very little of it that you can defend. But of course, he remains a significant musical figure, so I'm still interested in what he is doing musically, and that's really where the interest ends. So I'm going to get into that. Again, I don't begrudge anyone who has no interest in listening to new music from him. It has not been the most fruitful period of new music from him. Vultures 1 and Vultures 2, not strong efforts. Certainly poor albums, even if they have some highlights. Donda 2, a similar album to Bully in terms of how we were able to actually listen to it or lack thereof. Equally poor. And Donda 1, for that matter, an album that I thought was a massive disappointment. We are in a rough stretch right now. And whether we ever get out of that stretch is an open question. But Bully is here, and this is a album, in quotes, that was given to us in strange circumstances, tweeted out on multiple different tweets, different versions, Bully V1, etc., on Twitter, then uploaded to YouTube as like a around 30-minute short film, black and white, featuring Kanye's son Saint, slow-mo boxing, wrestling Japanese wrestlers in a ring. Then that gets taken down because shockingly, and I'm putting shockingly in the biggest quotes possible, the samples are not cleared on this album, because that's how Kanye is these days. He doesn't really do the work anymore, The other big aspect with this album is that he used AI for his own vocals. And it's kind of funny to me, because if we think about like recent Kanye album criticisms, a big aspect has been like he doesn't finish the music, he doesn't finish the verses, there's placeholder bars galore and things like that. Now he's literally using artificial intelligence to cut corners for his own work. Not even like he's ripping off someone else, he's ripping off himself with AI. Obviously that sucks, and AI art is bullshit. No one defends that. But it kind of like covers up his inherent laziness as a rapper these days. I guess we should have seen this coming. We also should have seen the fact that this is not an officially released record because the samples are not cleared. And if you think about it, Kanye, continuing to be at best a unpredictable public figure, but of course he's significantly worse than that at these stage in terms of things he says, the imagery he actively promotes, the bullshit he says. Less and less people want to clear samples for him because it's not all about the money after a while, right? So we're 2 albums beyond the fact that he never got to clear the Backstreet Boys Everybody sample, which was the original teaser for Vultures 1, lest we forget. Now, the samples with Bully, largely soul sample, 70s focus, nothing super famous here. Certainly less flashy samples than, say, a Backstreet Boys pull, right? The chorus of Backstreet Boys at that, right? But yeah, I mean, this got taken down off Apple Music after he tried to, jam it through to DSPs anyway. You can only really hear this right now from third-party YouTube uploads, SoundCloud, things like that. We'll see what happens with this. I think the important thing to remember with this is that he's not going to finish it, just like he never finished Donda 2. I mean, I remember getting YouTube comments when I said that about Donda 2, and like Kanye has like a incredibly large sect of like 15-year-old fans that like still believe in him completely as a creative artist and take his word for things like that. This is not getting officially released, just like Vultures 3 isn't coming out, just like Yandi never came out, just like So Help Me God never came out, Donda 3, which probably doesn't really exist, etc., etc., etc. This is what he does, and it's only more frequent these days, right? So again, you'd have to take all of this with massive grains of salt. The most interesting aspect of Kanye's 11th album, Bully, is how lyrically different it is from his incredibly erratic public persona these days. This is an album that's very joyous and upbeat and positive. It's not even defensive like some of his bars on Vultures, and it feels very much out of place for where Kanye actually is in reality. Uncleared 70s soul samples, primarily lots of Ye singing, more singing than rapping on this album. Unfortunately, the rapping that he does do on this is largely filled in with AI Kanye vocals because Kanye remains incapable of finishing music at this point. I do not expect this album to really see the light of day because these samples will not be cleared. Songs like Preacher Man, Melrose, like there's some decent songs on here. I prefer the best songs from last year on Vultures 1 though, such as Burn or Carnival, but production-wise, it at least intrigues because it brings you back to Kanye circa 4 or 5 seconds 10 years ago. That being said, we continue to grade on a curve when it comes to recent Kanye music. Now, if I think of like the sample stuff going on, right, I do think it was actually kind of interesting what he did recently with Vultures, where he got sued. He continues to be sued for all kinds of stuff like this. But when Black Sabbath didn't want to, license the sample of Iron Man for Kanye, Kanye in turn redid the song using Hell of a Life from Dark Twisted Fantasy, which of course features a previously already used sample of Iron Man. That is actually kind of clever and funny as far as music sampling and getting around that sort of thing goes. But of course, that's like an extremely limited case. You don't usually have previously cleared versions of samples on deck on your previous work, right? At this point, though, I mean, Kanye is really kind of running out of allies at this point. Ty Dolla $ign previously, not accepting Kanye's blatant anti-Semitism over the last year, so the Vultures project is all but done, and Kanye, of course, will throw darts at anyone who says anything like that. I mean, the thing, though, is that no one responds to what he says beyond, like, Playboy Cardi sending out one tweet and getting triple the likes that any of Kanye's bullshit does, Like, it's hard to really stick to just the music, especially when you're getting in such a compromised bootleg state the way you do. You'll notice that I haven't really gravitated and focused on any specific songs on here. Like, I think it's largely pretty boilerplate for the most part. Like, it's really the production and the samples carrying everything. Also, the best aspects of everything are unsurprisingly all the hooks and choruses, because again, the verses are really thin and also pretty sparse. Like, it's mainly singing, right? I would compare this to the Vultures albums and Donda 2, and it's a different flavor, because it's less rapping. I guess it's vaguely like Jesus is King in that regard, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think the Vultures albums had a lot more polish than this, which says a lot because those were not polished albums. But I mean, those had big bangers that I liked compared to this. And I mean, there's been a lot of fanfare about Bully online that I find pretty hard to understand, to be honest. And again, I think there's just a lot of like cheerleading fans of Kanye at this stage, which is kind of stupid because we should be holding the standard high given the incredible highs he's previously given us in a lifetime ago at this point. So yeah, Bully, I do think it's worth a listen. It's short. And again, it's just interesting that it's like so reminiscent of like a production style Kanye briefly was using like 10 years ago. And it's so completely different vibe wise and message wise from anything he's saying these days publicly, which is just kind of interesting, I guess. But yeah, that's Kanye's Bully. Let me know what you liked about it. What song stood out to you most? I'm sure there's different versions continuing to come out, but then that'll probably dissipate and we'll just move on like we do with every half-assed album he puts out. Let me know. And for more music reviews, more rap reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. That's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, we have a litany of things to get into once again. HBO's The White Lotus Season 3 will be wrapping up. A lot to talk about there. The Minecraft movie, we'll see. The action thriller film, The Amateur, starring Rami Malek. Gonna get to that a little early. Looking forward to it. Also, new music from Shy Cartier and Mark of the K-pop world. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See links below. Get the best of 2025. Get the best of 2025 Spotify post link below. Let me know it's good, and I'll see you next week.